I saw him at a family function, and he pulled me outside. We were smoking a cigarette, and he pulled this coin out of his pocket, and he gave it to me, and he said, "Man, I've been clean for 2 years." And I was like, "What the fuck is that?" And he was like, "Man, I just go to this program, and they talk about their problems and this and that." And I was like, "Oh, I might try that."
That was Vincent Ray Williams III, CEO and founder of Urban Compassion Project, a nonprofit committed to the health, welfare, and empowerment of the unhoused. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. In this podcast, Vincent shares his life story with us. I want to warn listeners, Vincent's story is a difficult, painful, and traumatic one that involves several tales of violence and abuse against women and children. Please be warned that these episodes contain potentially triggering content. Vincent was born in Oakland to parents addicted to crack. He and his older brother were taken from their parents and put in various foster homes and group homes, where the abuse never seemed to stop. He shares stories of being a child and surviving any way he could. We end part one with Vincent's eventual reconnection with his brother, a meeting that would lead to his own sobering up. Please check back Thursday for part two and the continuation of Vincent's life story, including how he started Urban Compassion Project. Here's Vincent.
So I'm biracial. My father is black. My mother's Puerto Rican. My father's family comes from Louisiana.
Where about Louisiana?
Not particularly sure. So we have some family from Louisiana and some family from Little Rock, Arkansas.
Okay.
My family was definitely products of their environments, you know, especially from the South, coming up in that culture, you know, trying to move from the South to Oakland to kind of make a better way for my father and my uncles and aunts, you know.
So your dad's family moved out here?
Yeah, they moved out here.
Do you know when that happened?
This was decades ago.
50s, 60s maybe?
I would say earlier.
Oh, okay.
Earlier than that.
Okay.
I would say earlier than that. My grandfather on my Puerto Rican side, he came from Puerto Rico because he wanted a better life for my mother and my aunts and uncles on that side. You know, it didn't really work out the way that everybody had hoped for it to. You know, my grandfather on my Puerto Rican side, he settled in Hayward.
Okay.
And my grandparents on my black side, they settled in deep East Oakland.
Okay.
You know, and I mean, I would like to say that everything was great until the 80s. You know, and so a lot of us know what happened in the 80s. My father, man, I never knew. I never met him, never saw his face. You know, he was a 26-year Marine vet. He brought a lot of stuff home from, you know, places he had been overseas and tours he had been on, you know, and he already had an addiction. So when the crack epidemic hit, you know, it was natural.
Right.
Like, just move right into a new addiction. And he met my mother, you know, who had her own addiction, you know, and so it was very toxic.
Did they meet in the 80s, do you know? Or?
They did meet in the 80s.
Your parents met in the 80s?
Yeah,
okay.
they met in the 80s. So I was born in 87.
Okay.
My brother before me was born in 86. We're 11 months apart.
Up
we're
here
the
in
two
Oakland,
youngest. Yeah.
they met and started having y'all up in Oakland? Okay.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of brothers and sisters scattered around. Some of us have different moms. Some of us have different dads.
Oh, okay.
Right.
But
do you want to tell more about the story of your parents meeting? It sounds like they were both in rough spots, but they met and had y'all. So
it was. I mean, we hear stories about, you know, some of the shit that people go through, you know, and how they have to take care of themselves and what they have to do to survive, you know. And when people describe my father, they describe him as, and even still today, they describe him as a hustler. Like, he knew how to get what he needed and what he wanted. And my mother was the same way. She didn't really have a problem getting what she needed and wanted because she was absolutely stunning back then, right? And so men responded to her very well. And so when crack came around, they were already selling drugs, you know, and it wasn't a dime here and a nickel there. You know, they were moving some weight. And so I think it was because of the circles that they ran in that naturally they met each other. And then my grandfather actually moved to 82nd in Oakland.
On your mom's side, your grandfather?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, on my mom's side. They moved to 82nd out here in Oakland. And all of my family, basically on my black side that's in Oakland, live in the deep East Oakland. So naturally, they kind of just gravitated towards each other.
Did the families come together, like on your mom's and dad's side? Okay.
No.
Some clashes?
There's been a lot of division.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misunderstanding in culture. My grandfather was, on my Puerto Rican side, was, he stood on his principles and his values, and so did my other grandparents, you know? And like any parent, they wanted to see the best for their children no matter how old they got. So my mom doing the shit she was doing, and then my dad doing the stuff he was doing, the different sides of the families just didn't agree. They knew it was toxic, right? They knew that it wasn't going to end well between the two of them. And so it caused a lot of division naturally.
Okay, so you said you were born in 87? Is that
Yeah,
right?
October 29, 1987.
Do you speak Spanish?
Scorpio.
Yeah.
Scorpio. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. We had a question from the crowd.
Yes.
Do you speak Spanish?
Do you speak your language?
Spanish is my first language,
Oh, well,
Okay.
That's
but there's some trauma that comes from that. So, I mean, obviously didn't get into my childhood, but what ended up happening with that is at 6 months old, me and my brother were taken from my mom's custody. My dad had beat her unconscious.
Okay.
And I didn't know at the time, but she had called OPD and child services because she was concerned for us and wanted to protect us, and they took us away and put us in a foster home. And it was in that foster home that a lot happened, and one of those things was me and my brother being biracial, and you know, one of our languages being Spanish. We weren't allowed to speak Spanish, so anytime we would speak Spanish, we would get beaten, locked in a closet.
Jeez. It reminds me of the story, I mean, more severe, but like the kids who are naturally left-handed,
me.
and then back in the day they'd be like, no, and if they didn't try to write with their right hand, they'd beat them. I'm like,
Yeah, it was. I mean, over time, it just kind of went I don't want to say it went away, because like I listen to Spanish music, you know, and I understand conversation. And I've been to Puerto Rico a couple of times, and it's like when I'm in it. But when I'm not, the trauma speaks for itself, and I kind of detach from it. So like if I see somebody randomly on the street and they say something to me in Spanish, although I want to respond, like my trauma won't allow me to. So it's been like this process of kind of getting out of my own way enough,
Right.
so that I can discover that again and start to explore it.
right. Do you want to talk about the foster world, like growing up in that?
Fuck the system. No.
Oh, my God.
I mean, that could be enough.
It's I mean, I'm an open book. You know, so yeah, we went into foster care, 6 months old, going into foster care. And from 5 years old, from early as I can remember, you know, for things as simple as like putting my shoes on the wrong foot, you know, I would be beat. Like a whooping is a whooping. Like, kids used to get whoopings. Obviously, it's not suggested anymore, but this wasn't a whooping. This was a beating.
Yeah.
You know, I fall off the swing and scrape my knee, and I would get beat. And over again, we would be locked in this pantry. We weren't fed. You know, and when we were fed runny eggs with ketchup, and then they would give us a cup of grapefruit juice with NyQuil in it, so that when we were done eating, we would pass out. You know, and it was a home that was about 7 of us in it. There was one other family that was all related, and then there was me and my older brother. And I was molested every single day that I can remember, until I made a decision at 8 years old that I didn't know where I was going to go, but I didn't want to be there anymore.
Okay.
Right? So like I ran away.
On your own or with your brother?
No, on my own.
Just on your own. Okay.
On my own. My brother didn't want to go with me. It broke my heart. He wanted to stay. His mind told him, being a child, that none of the stuff that was going on was actually going on. So he just pushed it down.
Like a defense mechanism,
Yeah.
so he could cope.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of fucked me up because it was like, this is my hero. This is my brother. Like, go with me. And he was like, nothing's wrong. Like,
So what happened when you left?
I went to a group home. I went to my first group home. It was in West Oakland, I want to call it Martin Luther King Park. That's not Martin Luther King Park though. But I went to my first group home, and I thought that it was going to be different as well, right?
You just walked in there, an 8-year-old?
Well, I mean, they took me, so the police took me
Okay.
to CPS, and I spent a day or two there, and then CPS took me to this group home.
Got it.
And they introduced me to the people, and it seemed like it was all cool, and I was like, yes, finally I'm going to get away from what had been happening. And I get to the group home, and after about a week, like, all the facades came down. It just, all of the niceness kind of went away. I found myself in the same position where at this group home, like, we weren't being sexually assaulted, but, like, I remember one occasion that I didn't make my bed in the morning, you know? I never made my bed because I never really had any covers on my bed to make them because they would be taken in the foster home we were in.
Right.
So nobody had ever taught me how to make a bed. So when I crawled out of bed one day, I'm looking at the bed like, okay, cool. I'll get back in it later. And about 10 minutes later, I got called in and I got yelled at. And we had a TV, right, a little box TV. And I remember the manager of the house, she like ripped the cord out the back of it. And beat the shit out of me with it. So like a standard started to be set in my life for me that made me feel like anywhere I go, they're gonna do this to me, like they're gonna hurt me.
Right. And you're 8.
I'm 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. And soon I ran from that group home.
Okay.
So my thing became like, I'm gonna get somewhere, I'm gonna allow them to feed me, I'm gonna allow myself to be clothed, maybe get a bath, steal some food, and I'm just gonna run away. And that just kind of became my thing.
Did you have hope that you would find a place that wouldn't hurt you? Or did you even think about that? You're just surviving.
I didn't think anything like that existed.
Yeah.
I honestly thought that something was wrong with me. I thought something was wrong with me because these things kept happening.
Yep.
And nobody was telling me that anything, you know, that it was wrong what was happening to me. When I was in the foster home, I would go to school, and at some point I got into these special schools, and I remember going to school and I would tell people they're hurting us. I would tell teachers they're hurting us, right? It would be occasions where I couldn't sit down because, like, I had been molested over and over again, and I would have black eyes and busted lips, and I would walk into school and I would tell them, like, they're hurting us, and they deemed me a problem child and filled me up with all these psychotropic medications. And when I would act out because I wanted somebody to help me, they would put me in what was called a quiet room. And they would just lock the door and they would leave me in there until I cried it out and fell asleep because I was exhausted. So when adults didn't show up, the police didn't show up. I called the police one time when I was in the foster home, and the foster mom, she told the police that me and my brother had been fighting, and that's why I looked the way that I looked. And he told me, young man, you shouldn't call and lie because people actually really need help.
Right.
And when he walked out, like, that was another turning point for me. I was like, fuck, you can't trust the police.
Like a series of adults failing children.
Right.
So school wasn't even
School was...
a respite or like a refuge.
It wasn't. I didn't have...
What
it
about
was-
friends? Were you making friends at school at least?
I didn't have any friends at school.
Okay.
Because I was always in trouble.
Right.
I was
Taken
always
away.
in trouble. Yeah, I was always isolated from everybody else. My desk was always the closest to the teacher. It always had walls on it, right? Like, it was... I remember everybody else had a desk that they would sit in, and everybody seemed like they were having fun. But I had this desk that was like right by the teacher's desk, and it had these walls, and I just had to sit there. And if I tried to turn around and talk to somebody, like, I would get yelled at.
So how long did you stick with school? Like, did you
I actually
go to high school and stuff?
I did go to high school. I got expelled almost from every school that I went to because I love to fight people.
Over here in Oakland or?
In Oakland,
Okay.
every school that I went to, I got expelled from, so I went to Low Middle School.
Okay.
And on my first day there, I punched somebody out by their locker because I knew them from juvenile hall, and we had some beef. You know, and I still had the mindset, I got to get you before you get me.
Right.
I went to Oakland High briefly. I went to Fremont, which is right down the street.
Skyline?
I didn't go to Skyline. Skyline wouldn't accept me. You had to be a little bit more,
I would Skyline.
you know, bougie to go to Skyline. But I actually finished school.
Okay.
So what ended up happening is, like, everything that I had been through, like, I have to say, like, I took my first hit of crack when I was 9.
Okay.
Right, in an alley in San Francisco off of 16th and Mission. Right, that was shortly after I made up my mind that, like, I was gonna keep running from these different places. So I started selling dope, and then one day, unfortunately, like, I had to watch somebody take a hit, right, because she was using my lighter, and I liked what I saw, and I just knew that it seemed like she wasn't there anymore, and I wanted to try that. So my life went on this, like, downward spiral real fast. At 9, by 11, I was selling myself on the street, right, so that I could survive. You know,
Over
I
in San
figured
Francisco or here?
Here on this street and in San Francisco.
Okay.
Anywhere that I could.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is I felt like, you know what, people are taking advantage of me anyways. I might as well capitalize.
Make money
off
on
of
it, yeah.
I might as well get money off of it, right? And so that became, you know, one of my things, and I started committing crimes.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, it was stealing stuff out of the store at first, and then it was snatching purses and dragging people halfway down the block to try to get their purse from them. It was literally burglarizing every business in the Laurel district at least 3 times within a year.
Were you kind of on your own, Vincent, or did you have a crew?
Nope.
Just on your own.
I didn't like people. I had one friend that's from this area. We were really, really close. I knew everybody here. But I had one friend, and it's unfortunate, but the day I actually decided to change my life, he died.
Sorry.
You know, and I just barely got past, like, the guilt and the shame of my involvement in that.
Right.
Right?
Shit.
Yeah.
Did you ever reconnect with your brother?
Yeah.
Do you want to share that story?
Fucking Willie, man.
I do now.
My brother's name is Willie. He's my hero. You know, he has his own stuff going on. He's in prison right now. You know, in 2010, I didn't know what I was gonna do with my life. I didn't really want to change my life, but I saw him at a get-together family for Thanksgiving. You know, and he had gotten clean. You know, and
2010, so you're like 22, 23?
yeah.
Okay.
Fresh out of California Youth Authority,
Okay.
running around doing craziness. And I saw him at a family function, and he pulled me outside. We were smoking a cigarette, and he pulled this coin out of his pocket, and he gave it to me, and he said, "Man, I've been clean for 2 years." And I was like, "What the fuck is that?" And he was like, "Man, I just go to this program, and they talk about their problems and this and that." And I was like, "Oh, I might try that." But I thought that I was a bigger monster than my brother was, because some of the stuff that I did, so I wasn't sure if it would work for me.
Right.
But I tried it,
Okay.
and it worked.
Is this AA or NA?
This is NA,
Don't
NA.
hurt to try.
right? And it worked.
Okay.
You know, and I got a little time behind me, like 18 months, and then I decided that I wanted to give it another try, and it actually ended at that gas station that we were just at.
Okay.
That run ended, and that was the last time that I got high. It was September 13th, 2012.
Okay.
So it's been over 9 years now, you know, and my brother played a big role in that. He played a big role in just my upbringing. You know, he gangbanged, and I wanted to gangbang, but he saw that I wasn't, like, by myself, I was already enough of a monster. So with other people, it would have probably been worse. And so he wouldn't allow me into that world.
Interesting.
You know,
Yeah.
he wouldn't allow me into that world.
He's protecting you.
He was protecting me. I didn't
Yep.
see it as that, but as
Did it upset you
it pissed
at the
me
time?
off.
Yeah, at the time. Yeah.
I was like, "Do you know who I am?"
Right.
Like, people know me.
Right.
Like, I already got clout. I don't need to prove myself. He wasn't having it.
Yeah.
You know, but also, like, as a child, I don't forget that there were nights where he would make me, like, sleep under the bed. so that he could lay in the bed. So if anybody came in that night, like they wouldn't get me.
Right.
Being a child and putting yourself in that place, like to take on the brunt of that abuse so that you can protect your little brother, that means a lot.
That's huge.
And
yeah.
I didn't acknowledge it while I was growing up, but yeah, he's kind of backslid, but he's been a lot better recently. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of where he's at emotionally and spiritually right now. And we talk. He called when we were at the gas station, and he'll call back later. I'll send him an email. It's my brother, his family, and we've been through a lot together.
Yeah.
From going to jail together to, committing crimes together. And family's very important to me. It hasn't always been important to me, but like I find that like if anything else, like I just want to make sure that I'm here whenever he needs me, and that I can like show up for him however he needs me, because there's a lot of people out here that don't have that support.
Right.
They'll never have that support. And I just remember being locked up time and time again and wishing that I had like some kind of family support or even a friend to reach out to me, and nobody ever hit me up. So being able to be the person on the other side of the phone that calls, when he calls and I'm like, what's up, bud? And you're like, hey, like it goes a long way, to help a person be able to like be on the inside and not have to, for 15 minutes a day, not have to deal with the stress and anxiety of what's going on the yard. They could just tap in with the outside.
Yeah, no, and I'm just thinking like the, I guess, irony or whatever of feeling that very real isolation in a big city. You know what I mean? It's like there's nowhere else where there's more people, but the circumstances and everything that leads you to feel isolated and feel like you're on your own. It's powerful shit.
I wanted to be on my own when I was out here running the streets. I figured if I could master like surviving on the streets, nobody could hurt me.
Right.
Nobody could hurt me. I could set my own standard for, what protecting myself looked like. I'm 9 years old. I'm walking down High Street and I got a gun on me like this and it's sticking out and I'm walking like this because nobody's gonna fuck with me, and you're not gonna get me before I get you. I remember walking around by MacArthur Bart, and like people still share this story, like walking around by MacArthur Bart, and I had on some shorts and a tank top, and I had 2 samurai swords on my back and 2 50 cals in the shoulder holster, and I was just walking down the street in broad daylight like it was the thing to do, and I'm like 13 years old.
Yeah.
Right? But I wanted people to see outwardly that I was a hard ass when really I was terrified.
Totally.
Yeah.
So outward like warrior,
Yeah.
but inner turmoil.
And all somebody had
trauma.
to do was just press just a little bit, and I would have fallen apart. I did over and over again. I wasn't hard.
Did you ever reconnect, you or your brother ever reconnect with y'all's parents? And do you want to share that?
So my father died in 97
Okay.
from complications of AIDS.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he gave HIV to my mother, who gave it to me as a child through childbirth. So that's a big part of my story.
Okay.
My mother, she made a big decision when we were children, with what she did. And I blamed her for everything.
Right.
I blamed her for everything that happened in my life because she didn't show up. I never really had a view of my father. I didn't care one way or another. So even after he passed, like I was like, okay,
You never really had a relationship or knew him very well. Yeah.
I didn't care to.
Right.
Like the sole focus for me emotionally was my mother.
Right.
Right? You did this to me. You put me in this place. If it wasn't because of you, none of this shit would have happened. And I didn't meet my mother until I was 15.
That was Vincent Ray Williams III. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, Vincent shares how he started Urban Compassion Project. Part 2 drops Thursday wherever you listen to podcasts. Music for the podcast was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Original photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 4th season, we have more than 180 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can, please rate and review the show so we can reach even more folks. We love email, and we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.